Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the science behind one of the most fundamental questions of our biology, and we're going to do it using some amazing insights from Stanford neurobiologist Dr. Neeraj Shah.
The concept.
Okay, let's just get right into it. This is a big question, right? It carries so much cultural weight. But what does the biology actually have to say about it? Are we talking about real structural differences, or is it all just a bunch of stereotypes? Well, according to decades of research, the answer is a pretty clear yes. And look, this isn't about one being better or worse than the other. It's about the specific, foundational wiring of our brains, a process that actually kicks off with just one tiny genetic instruction.
So how does all this differentiation even begin? Most of us probably think it's all about our chromosomes, but the real story is actually a little more specific than that.
We all remember this from biology class, right? Females typically have two X chromosomes, and males have an X and a Y. But here's the thing, the Y chromosome itself isn't the whole story. What's really important is that it carries one very specific and incredibly powerful instruction. And that instruction is a gene called SRY. You can think of it as the master switch. Its presence, or its absence, is the real deciding factor for whether an embryo starts down the male or the female biological pathway. It's that critical.
As Dr. Shah himself puts it, if you're focusing on the entire Y chromosome, you're kind of missing the point. The real power to direct all of this biological development is packed into this one single gene.
And here's where you can really see this gene's power in action. In some really rare cases, the SYR gene can actually jump from the Y chromosome onto another one. Now, if that happens in an embryo that's XX, that individual will develop as a biological male. And on the flip side, if you have an XY individual where that SYR gene is missing or doesn't work, they'll develop as a female. It really is all about SYR. All right, so let's move on to the next step. Let's see how this single genetic switch kicks off this powerful hormonal chain reaction inside the womb that literally builds the brain and the body from the ground up. So early on in development, an embryo's gonads are what's called bipotential. That just means they have the potential to become either ovaries or testes. They can go either way. Then, right around the early second trimester, this critical window opens up. The SRY gene either flips the switch or it doesn't. Now, if SRY is there and is working, it signals those bipotential gonads to develop into testes. These new testes immediately get to work, producing the hormone testosterone. And it's this flood of testosterone that really acts as the main architect, sculpting the developing brain and body along a typically male pathway. So, what about female development? Well, in mammals, there isn't really an equivalent master switch for femaleness. If the SRY gene is absent, a pre-programmed genetic pathway for female development just unfolds. It proceeds on its own. But how can we be so sure about all of this? Well, it turns out we can actually see these biological rules playing out right here in the real world. You see, certain rare genetic conditions in people act like nature's own experiments. And they're totally fascinating because they show us exactly what happens when just one piece of this super complex developmental puzzle is changed. It lets us isolate the role of a single gene or a specific hormone. So let's take a look at androgen insensitivity syndrome. In this case, an individual is genetically male. They're XY, they have a working SRY gene. Their testes make testosterone just fine, but their body's cells are missing the receptors to hear it. It's like a signal is being broadcast, but nobody has a radio to pick it up. And because of that, the body develops along the female pathway. Then there's another condition, sometimes called penis at 12 syndrome. These individuals are also genetically male, XY with SRY. They make testosterone, but their bodies can't convert it into a much more potent form that's needed for early genital development. So they appear female when they're born. But then puberty hits, and this massive surge of regular testosterone is finally powerful enough to trigger masculinization, and they actually develop a penis. Incredible. So here's the really crucial takeaway. These hormones, acting so early in development, aren't just causing temporary changes. They are literally building permanent, sex-specific structures right into the brain. This early hormonal environment shapes the brain's circuitry in ways that are irreversible. So in some parts of the brain that control innate behaviors, testosterone actually helps neurons survive, meaning males end up with more of them. In other areas, the opposite happens. We're talking about a permanent structural difference, and it's all set in place long before birth. And this brings us to a really critical distinction. You have the organizing effects of hormones. These happen in the womb. They are permanent. Think of it like building the computer's hardware. Then, much later, at puberty, you get the activating effects. These are more like the software updates that come along and switch on all those circuits that were built years earlier. And the scale of these structural differences, it's not small. In some of these key brain regions that control our innate behaviors, scientists are seeing a 2 to 3-fold difference in the sheer number of cells between males and females. That's a huge difference. Okay, now this next part is absolutely essential to understand. We have to be really clear about what this biology explains, and just as importantly, what it doesn't explain. This science gives us a framework, not the complete picture. So, all the mechanisms we've just talked about, the SRY gene, testosterone, the permanent wiring of brain circuits, this is the domain of biological sex. These are the measurable physical components of the blueprint. Gender, on the other hand, is a much more complex and uniquely human concept. It's about our internal sense of who we are, how we express that identity, and all the social and cultural contexts we live in. You know, science doesn't have an animal model for gender. It's our thing. So if there's one big takeaway from all this, it's that biology provides a foundational blueprint for our physical sex. It absolutely sets the stage, but it doesn't, and it really can't, map out the entire rich and deeply personal human experience of gender. And that kind of leaves us with a fascinating final thought to chew on. If we know that our brains are built with these fundamental sex-specific circuits before we're even born, how does that deep-seated biological foundation influence the unique way that each and every one of us perceives and interacts with the world?